Great. I'm John Fairhall. I live in Oxford, and I'm just here to learn as much as I can about this project, not really because of what the impact would be on Oxford, but just generally the impact that it would have on the town of Easton and the county of Talbot County. When you look at the map, as I've done a number of times before this meeting, and of course again at this meeting, you get the impression right away you're building a new town within this town. Okay, it's a sort of a development that's going to have intensely developed. I mean, there's a large number of homes, 456 or 457. So you have to have parking for, hundreds of people who might have cars, and of course the cars that are going to come in and out of the development all day. There is provision made for commercial spaces, I guess, there. It's part of the text for the meeting that we're having right now. So if you're building a town within a town, does it really, one of the questions that just occurs to me is, does this new town within the town actually connect with the town? And how does it connect with the town? And at what cost? Has there been a cost-benefit analysis dealing with what the cost to government, meaning taxpayers? I understand it's a balance sheet, maybe pros and cons when you look at the dollars and cents being spent here and how people in the community of Easton, the town of Easton, as well as Talbot County would benefit from this. That would be, maybe you have to build a new school, I don't know. Maybe you need to staff a new firehouse there. You'll get the building or the space for free, but maybe you've got to staff it. Traffic, okay, so down the road we're looking at, obviously, some anticipation of a buildup of traffic. And I couldn't quite follow the details of the conversation about would there be traffic lights initially or traffic lights later, where would they be? But certainly there's going to be a giant leap forward in traffic. And some of that traffic obviously will benefit shopkeepers at the shopping centers that exist now and within the town as well. I don't know whether there'll be some competition down the road if you build some retail space there, and how people in the town who have their own retail space and are trying to make good use of it would feel about it. And lastly, would the developer be willing to take, however you would work this out, take groups of people, townspeople, through the property and give them a sort of a real visceral, real close-up look at just how things are. Because I think when you look at the map, you may draw the wrong impressions. And I don't mean negative ones necessarily, but just the wrong impressions. I think it would be good, if you could, to expand the universe of people who can come and judge what's about to take place on that land, or might take place on this land should this be developed. Thank you.
I'm Tom Ledvina, 7585 Polly's Hill Lane, president of the Paper Mill Crossing Homeowners Association. Growth in Easton and Talbot County has exploded. Today there are over 800 dwellings either recently completed or approved for Easton. 900 more, including this development, are proposed or under review. Easton has spent all its own growth allocation, you heard that. This is a request for a supplemental to allow intense development. Now, when I was growing up, and I spent my allowance, and I had to go to mom or dad and ask for more, I had to have a damn good reason. And that ought to be the case here as well. The Talbot County Code is clear that even if a developer meets the minimum standards, as you heard, a request for a supplemental growth allocation doesn't have to be approved, because this plan does not significantly advance the goals of the Chesapeake Bay Critical Area Program. You can and should disapprove it. Keep these goals uppermost in mind from the critical area plan. Minimize adverse impacts on water quality. Minimize. Conserve wildlife habitat. Develop land policies that accommodate growth but address adverse environmental impacts. This is a massive development. Just the development proposed for the 66 acres of critical area exceeds that approved for either the Gannon Estates or the Four Seasons developments, and they didn't involve critical area. But suppose you swallow hard and decide that a design that locates 62% of its dwellings in the critical area is okay. What should be done with the rest of the critical area? Should that 25 acres close to Oxford Road and the Tretavon be covered with another Easton sports complex. The fields, snack bars, huge parking lot, everything else you've heard about that. Doesn't this complex have to be built? This complex doesn't have to be built, and it doesn't have to be built here. These 25 acres should be used to mitigate rather than increase the impacts of development. To promote critical area program goals, it should be used for a passive meadow park with warm weather grasses, low bushes, trails, modest parking, and smaller restrooms. We aren't against more parks, but there is no compelling evidence that another sports complex is needed, preferred, or fiscally sound, and especially here. Easton has no long-range plan or needs analysis requiring it. The 2022 Talbot County Land Preservation Parks and Recreation Plan found no such need. Surveys for the new Easton Comprehensive Plan and Talbot County Parks Plan preferred more passive versus active parks. If scheduling issues exist at Northeastern, it's because teams, including teams outside Talbot County, can reserve large blocks of field time, whether or not they use it, at no cost. There's pending policy changes that will solve those problems. Let me come back. I want to do the rest together. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Phil Livingston. I live at 104 3rd Street in Oxford, Maryland. Probably the best place in the world to live. I've lived in 13 states, moved 26 times. I've lived in apartments, condos, townhouses, and single-family homes. What I see here is Anne Arundel County. That's what I see. If I wanted to live in Anne Arundel County, I wouldn't have come here. I would move there. And I was there this morning. And the happiest moment of my day was on the downslope of the bridge to God's great kingdom. I have lived in developments, and this is like a cookie cutter development from other states that I've lived in. Pull out a plan, oh, we did this in Mississippi. We did that in Illinois. Well, we'll do this in Easton. It's all the same. When you take apartments and put them in the middle of single-family houses, you will have problems. When you create alleyways in the back of homes, you're just inviting an element that you don't want in your backyard, because I've seen it and it is not good. We don't require traffic lights on Oxford Road from this development yet. And he said, in the future. We didn't have a traffic light at Dogwood Alley, I think it is, the Black Dog Alley. But if you ever drive down the road to Denton, before the traffic light, you would see an accident almost weekly. Now there's a traffic light. No increase in traffic, just a lot of wrecks. That's what you're going to have here. 450 homes, that sounds like 800 cars. Most people have their own car, husband, wife, teenagers. 450 homes, 800 cars, easy. I didn't see a lot of parking for the park. You ever been to a ballpark with your children on the weekends? Soccer fields, tennis courts. Where are you going to park? 200 kids, 400 parents. I didn't see any parking. I know, we'll park in front of your house. Just saying, been around the block, and the block I like best, and now that I'm retired, can you tell? The block that I like best, and out of all the states that I've lived in, and the 42 countries that I've traveled to, I pick Oxford to live in. And I picked Talbot County to live in, where I could live anywhere in the world. But this is one of the finest places I've seen on earth, and we don't need to screw it up with another 450 homes.
My name's Reginald Taylor. I'm a resident of Paper Mill Crossing. My address is 7590 Poplar Hill Lane. My wife and I have lived there for 2 years. So what we're proposing, well, first of all, let me say that I totally support first what Tom had to say and the very eloquent words provided by Phil. And to add my 2 cents, so the ball fields that are being proposed are right outside my back porch. So as my wife and I wake up in the morning and go outside and have coffee or hang out back there, we're going to be looking at these ball fields. And so part of my interest here is clearly very selfish. And my thoughts are, so we're going to go from a field to things that are artificial and things that are buildings and construction and the like. Why would we change from the field that's there, to the extent we have to go forward with the development, which I'm a reasonable person, we may have to do that. Does it make sense to go from a field to artificial fields? Why not just keep it as a passive park, or make it a passive park and something that, quite frankly, is one of the reasons my wife and I moved to this area from DC. And one of the things, and I will second Phil's thoughts about coming from Anne Arundel County and coming over the Bay Bridge, and how your blood pressure certainly goes down from where it was. So I certainly, if I had my choice, would not want the development to be built, but understanding that we may have to go forward with it, would strongly ask you to reconsider the orientation of the ball fields and or whether or not they're even necessary. Thank you.
I am Betty Mackey. I live in Easton. I learned recently that a developer plans to build a large new development at Poplar Hill along Oxford Road. Some of the development will be on designated critical area, but only if both Talbot County and Easton approve. These critical areas are designated this way because they are critical to protecting the Chesapeake Bay and waters in between. This plan is to scrape and level 25 acres in the critical area for a sports complex with a 209-car parking lot. These buildings, parking lot, and multi-purpose fields are designed to shed water. And in this runoff water, there would be herbicides, fertilizer, and insecticides. This runoff will reach the bay and the waters in between. Why not grow an emergent meadow instead? An emergent meadow works with nature. It consists of tall native grasses, low shrubbery, and wildflowers, using existing contours and features that would absorb runoff. A peaceful place for families, walkers, and perhaps people with disabilities. A place that would be available to everyone from sunrise to sunset. A place without needing team membership. A place where teachers might take their students for a field trip. In contrast, a sports complex would be a large environmental desert. The high maintenance cost of these buildings and grounds would be borne by local taxpayers. In recent years, scientists have gathered extensive evidence that spending time in nature positively affects people's emotions and physical health. Research has found that even 10 minutes of exposure to birdsong has very positive effects on people's moods. Oakland Conservation Park and Pickering Creek have the closest meadows to Easton. I have visited both many times. Both are very popular with people and wildlife. I've seen the pleasure other visitors, young and old, get from this type of park. Once meadows are established, they need little upkeep beyond a prescribed mowing. In recent surveys, the residents of Easton and Talbot County have expressed a preference for more passive natural areas. Easton's comprehensive plan regarding new construction is sensible, reasonable, and on target to keep Easton a rural community. The recent survey shows that your citizens agree. In summary, I want to keep the scenic Oxford Road rural and beautiful. I do not want outsiders or locals making their money by destroying our natural areas that protect our wildlife, our waterways, our health, and our way of life. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm John Pepe. I live at 103 Richardson Street in Oxford, Maryland. I just wanted to let you know that I'm a full-time or a resident of Talbot County. I was a resident of Queen Anne County for 25 years. I grew up there. as a child, and as an adult, I went to many of the meetings down there. And I heard some words that rang true here tonight, consistent with the comprehensive plan. I heard that from a lot of out-of-town developers in Queen Anne County planning meetings. I heard it from Rouse when he wanted to develop Y Island, and thank God that project never happened. This is because it's consistent with the plan. When you make the changes to the IDA and LDA and zoning, and then you do all the wonderful little bioswales, you're getting ready to think about putting a development that is 25% larger in residential community than the whole town of Oxford. And you're going to put that at the other end of the road. I heard the highway study. I didn't hear anything about peak time impact. We all know if you drive up and down this road between 7:30 and 8 o'clock in the morning, that traffic backs up beyond the entrance to Easton Club. You're going to need stoplights. You're going to have problems. This is a real special place we live in Talbot County. I moved here because of that. You heard it from some of the other residents. 450 homes here, 1,000 down the road, 300 across the street. You're going to dilute the real estate values in this county tremendously over the next 10 years. And if we have another downturn, it's going to be a disaster. Nobody is thinking out 15, 20 years as to what this is going to cost. The cost-benefit analysis of running this community, infrastructure, police, fire, upkeep, public works. If you want to see what it's going to look like, drive down to Queen Anne County. It's not that far away. You don't want it here. Thank you.
My name is Bruce Harrington. I'm a longtime resident of Talbot County in Easton. I'm really hoping that the panel does not get seduced by a lot of facts and figures that have been presented to you. Some are facts, some are not. The proof will be in what happens later. I think you all are smart enough to know the impact that this has on the county. One of the things I did not see is what the benefits are for the residents of Talbot County now. I didn't see that show up anywhere. But I think there's a lot of detriment here, and I hope you'll think about that real hard. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Jim Wilcox. I'm a resident of 307 North Morris Street in Oxford. And I've got to apologize to start out with. I just showed up today. I haven't gone through all these extensive submissions that have apparently been made available to you, so I'm not able to go point by point and contest each and every argument that these hired guns have made to you after years and years of work on this project. I think that probably applies to the rest of the folks who are making comments here today, and I think you can get the sense of the community from what's been said. The two additional comments I'll make are that, as I understand it, Easton's already at its limit. So the question is whether Talbot wants to step in and cover them, even though Easton's already gone as far as they can. And I think that's a legitimate question for Talbot, separate from Easton. But I also understand, I could be wrong on this, but I understand that where these supplemental allocations have been made in the past, they're for relatively small parcels of land, like maybe 8 acres, something of that nature. This is totally disproportionate, much greater, as I understand it, than most of the allocations that have been sought and approved before. And if indeed people are as strongly opposed to it as apparent today, I question whether it's a good idea to reach out and go beyond what you've done in the past to approve this particular project. I'll make one other comment. I'm not an expert on parking, but our parking guy here was talking about LOS standards. I don't know really what those are, but if they're standards that apply nationwide, that really doesn't have any applicability to what we're doing on the Oxford Road and in Talbot County. We'd like to maintain the character of the community here, and the amount of traffic that might be acceptable somewhere else certainly is not acceptable to the residents of this area. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Up next is Karen Starr. I'd just like to say that I agree with speaker 1, 2, 3, and then I lost track after that. I started a land trust in Ohio in 1991, and critical area is one of the most precious things that you can provide a community. I'll also say that the designs in this development, I don't see anything progressive, I don't see anything forward-looking. I see what I saw in Ohio 30 years ago. That's what breaks my heart.
Good evening. My name is Owen Bailey. I'm the Director of Land Use and Policy for the Eastern Shore Land Conservancy, and I'm here to echo our preference for a passive meadow park over a sports complex. Our opinion is that a grasslands or meadow park is more appropriate for the critical area, and it really gives the town a unique opportunity. With the acquisition of the 200 forested acres from the program Open Space, the growth of the town's bike infrastructure, Idlewild Park, this is a chance for the town to create something that great towns and cities from across the U.S., like Boston, with their Emerald Neck, is to create a interconnected park and green space system. I echo your request to make sure that there is protected bike lanes and pedestrian access so that we can lower the traffic on that road, so that we can increase the equitable access to parks on both the new 200-acre forested park and a potential park at this site. Second, there's usually a preference for forested areas instead of grasslands, and grasslands are a threatened habitat on the Eastern Shore. They're sort of the missing middle housing for natural habitats. We don't see a lot of them. They benefit birds and pollinators. If we can turn this part of the development into a passive meadow grassland park, that would help our bird species, which are dying at huge rates. It would create benefits for the town, benefits for the residents. It would increase property values. And I looked to the town's comprehensive plan, chapter 4, on sensitive areas, and it says that early identification is key for finding these special, unique, and sensitive areas. And it says that as a principle, to protect the natural features and to incorporate them in the design. And that's all. Thank you.
Again, Matt Pluto with Shore Rivers, your Chop Tank River Keeper. We're here today to talk about the critical area growth allocation being requested. And while I don't have to emphasize to this body the importance of critical area, what I would like to emphasize is the importance of water quality, particularly right around this property and the upper reaches of the Tredaven River. So at Shore Rivers, we've been monitoring water quality for over 10 years, specifically right off of Easton Point. And what we've come to find out is that the upper portions of this river has some of the poorest water quality conditions of all the stations that we monitor. This is depicted in the table here that you see on page 2. Supporting our science and the research that we've done, the folks at NOAA's Oxford lab commissioned a study in 2018, and that study was a coastal ecological assessment of the Tredaven River. And I just want to point out some of the remarks that they concluded in there, and that is that there are clear signs of ecosystem degradation existing, especially in the areas affected by rapid growth and development. The signs of degradation were particularly evident in the subwatersheds near Easton, the most highly developed location, which was impacted by multiple stressors, phosphorus being a big one, low dissolved oxygen, nutrients, chemical contaminants, bacteria, the list goes on. The study went further into concluding looking at the fish population and how impervious surface impacts the fish population. And it's common knowledge in the science community that when you get up to about 10% of impervious surface in a drainage area, you start to see impacts to fish habitat. The NOAA study concluded that the absence of fish during the frequent low dissolved oxygen events at Easton Point may be related to the relatively high proportions of impervious surface in the urban subwatershed where Easton is located. So here we have a situation with very poor water quality already existing, more impervious surface going in. We can only imagine that water quality is going to continue to degrade in this area through this development. And for those reasons, you can find this inconsistent with the county comprehensive plan. I'll move on real quick. The grass sports fields anybody who has turf lawn or turf grass, we know that grass is just barely better than impervious surface. I mean, it's bad, right? And so the graph that I showed you really emphasizes how turf grass has pretty much no value to the ecological systems and water quality protection. And in fact, turf grass will need fertilized, it'll need cut more often. So here we are in the critical area fertilizing our lawns and cutting them and having impacts there. Finally, to your point, Jen, that you raised earlier, the state is undergoing a review of the stormwater manual, which was updated which was presented in 2000, updated in 2009, and we urge that the consideration be for the upgrade of that stormwater manual. Otherwise, all these limitations are going to be grandfathered into what are going to be considered outdated regulations. And so a few other points that I made in the comment letter that I encourage you to read, but I will just say that this is a precedent-setting decision. The town of Easton has ran out of growth allocations, and so this could be seen as the tip of the iceberg. And it's important how we act today on the future of how we're going to decide on this in the future. So thank you.
Thank you to all my friends and neighbors who came today to speak. I'll just wrap this up quickly. I'm going to compare now the two alternatives you have for that 25 acres, which is the sports complex. Drive down, look at Northeast Park, which is a wonderful park, but it's a sports complex. And a meadow park, such as you have at Eastern Conservation or out at Pickering Creek. And against the goals, not the minimum standards, the goals of the critical area program. Minimize water pollution. The sports complex has a huge parking lot. It really is there. It's 209 parking spaces, acres, and loads of impervious surface. Even the fields are designed to shed water. They are. They require, as discussed, regular applications of fertilizer, pesticides, and herbicides. A meadow park does not require fertilization, pesticides, or regular herbicides. So what isn't there can't run off. A meadow park will reduce remaining nutrient runoff not by the 15%, up to 50%, and sediment up to 75%. It's as efficient at reducing runoff as a mature forest. Protect wildlife habitat. That's the second goal of the critical area. A sports complex, as you've heard, an environmental desert. There's no habitat being created here. Now, it's a field. There's not much habitat there now, but there are turkeys and foxes out there. And 1,000 geese in the fall, but that's another story. There's no, the sports field, no cover, no food, no nesting sites. It will prevent wildlife from moving from those forested areas up by the Windmill Branch over to the new park at Easton Woodland Park. A meadow park would create a new grassland habitat badly needed by grassland birds, which have declined by 50% since 1970. It would also be used by forest-dwelling birds in the adjacent forest. Eastern forest birds have declined 30% since 1970. It complements and links Easton Woodland Park and Windmill Branch. It avoids needless environmental impacts and preserves the Easton rural feel. Now, Talbot County regulations require development to be ordered, efficient, or productive. A sports complex here is not. A sports complex would be far more expensive to maintain than a meadow park. It can't be used without constant maintenance, mowing, fertilizing, etc. The spending never ends. This is a park that could be built many other places in Easton. A meadow park is far easier and cheaper to maintain. It works with and complements the unique existing natural area near the Tread of Vaughan. So you can't relocate that anywhere else. The critical area program applies across Maryland. We all know that, but it is vitally important here. Think of the bay's beauty, wildlife, recreation, fisheries, history. It is the Chesapeake Bay that defines Easton and Talbot County. It's what makes this place such a special place, as you've heard. And we pay for sewage treatment plants. We ask farmers to take special care in how they farm. We ask watermen to limit their catch. Shouldn't this developer do its part for the bay? Shouldn't we require that any park built in this critical area must advance these critical area goals? Or is Save the Bay nothing more than a bumper sticker? Thank you.
Tom Alsbach speaking on behalf of Talbot Preservation Alliance. I lived here since there was no traffic light at the bypass on Oxford Road, so it's been a long time. I want to raise just a process issue with you, which probably sounds pretty boring, but I think it's important. The developer would like to decouple the issue of growth allocation from the overall consideration of the project. And that shouldn't be allowed to happen. You have this issue of consistency, compatibility with the comprehensive plan. It's a criterion for growth allocation. It's also a criterion for the granting of a PUD, which we get to later on. And perhaps there'd be a notion, let's put that off until we get to the PUD and just go ahead and rule on the growth allocation. I think that would be a mistake. There are issues that are raised by the layout of this project that clearly do not comport with the comprehensive plan for the town of Easton and that are supposed to be considered in connection with growth allocation. One of them can be seen just by looking at the overall layout of the project, and you can see, simply from looking at it, that this project as presented would not be compatible with the other properties in the neighborhood. It's not compatible with the Easton Club. It's not compatible with Cook's Hope. It's not compatible with Woodland Farms. It's not compatible with the neighborhood across the bypass at West Oak Avenue and so forth. And one of the principal criteria for consistency with the comprehensive plan, the town of Easton, is, in fact, I say the most important thing to consider when you're assessing proposed infill development is this project compatible with the surrounding neighborhood? And this is not. So that has to be taken into consideration now, even though one might say, well, let's put that off and talk about that when we're at the PUD stage. The issue of growth allocation should be factored into overall approval of the project. It gives you a lot of leverage. Perhaps there's some smaller amount of growth allocation that would be compatible. Perhaps is repositioned in a different way. But you, most importantly, shouldn't simply make a decision on growth allocation in a vacuum without insisting upon compatibility and consistency with the Town of Easton Comprehensive Plan. Look at pages 94, look at pages 97, 98, look at pages 114. There's a lot of criteria in there that have not been mentioned, but should be taken into account in consideration with what's in front of you right now. So that's all I wanted to throw into the pot there. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mark Ebersberger. I live at 8243 Easton Village Drive in Easton Village. I am a stormwater refugee from Howard County. That's the reason why I moved to Talbot County. And I would like to emphasize the issues about the athletic fields versus the natural growth fields. I think it's very important because that's what happened to me. We lived across from the Glenelg Country School, and they had a natural field, and they always bragged about being a green school. Well, they decided to build an athletic field across from us. Before then, we never had a stormwater problem on our property. And I voiced concerns about them building it, but they went ahead and they built it. And they told me everything was going to be fine. Once the grass came in, it would take care of the problem. Well, the grass did not take care of the problem. And 2 weeks after the facility was built, 2 weeks after my wife passed away, my house was completely surrounded by stormwater. And I encourage you, do not allow the building of the athletic fields. It can end up being a disaster, and I can testify to that. My other concern is they mentioned the stormwater retention facilities. Make sure they let you know what it costs to maintain those in the future, because they looked very nice in those pictures, but after 2 years, 5 years, it's something very different, and it's not cheap to maintain them.